Greetings, everybody. Welcome to a Heroes Peak Quick Peek. I'm your host, Chris, and I'm here to talk about animation. And for my first animation quick peek, I really am excited to talk about Arcane, which is the new Netflix animated series from the League of Legends MOBA video game universe created by Riot Games. They're a game studio who's looking to expand into multimedia production, animation, possibly live action, and we'll be talking about that eventually. But this is about one thing, and that is the animated show Arcane, which for me is the best thing I've seen this year. Animated by Fortiche Studios, which is a French animation studio I hadn't personally heard of before. This is a video game universe, so a lot of video games now have very extensive long-term backstories. They've built extensive character write-ups and things like that, but very often we don't see that translated beyond some really cool cutscenes and maybe in-game movies that are pretty cool, but we really haven't had great just series or movies, minus a few minor exceptions, but they really haven't translated very well. And I'm happy to say this is probably one of the best. And it's not even because it's almost like it's not a translation. It feels like it's created more from the ground up than it's trying to translate something you play in the game, which they did a great job. Apparently, this took about 6 years to produce. We don't know the production budget, but it's apparently very large, which is why a lot of why what I'm going to talk about when I get to the animation section is so surprising. So the good thing is you don't need to know anything about the game League of Legends in order to watch this show. So if you haven't played or you're played and you haven't read any of the extensive backstory, don't worry about it. It works just as well without it. There's already a second season announced. Did so well. It's one of, if not the top original series streaming on Netflix. So it's doing well, and there's a reason why it's doing so well. All right, let's talk about this. We're gonna start with a little bit of. This is a non-spoiler review. I'm going to try to keep it short. Maybe have a longer conversation later with some of the others of the podcast. But here's my basic review. So this story is the story of Piltover and the Undercity, known as Zon, fighting for its independence from Piltover, this high-end, rich, clean city of progress, very steampunk styled. And Zon is the dirty, hard underbelly of Piltover. We get this through the story of Vi and her sister Powder. This is the main tale of the story, though we do flip back and forth between what I would call a second main pair, and that would be the story of Jace and Victor. Vi and Powder are war orphans from the Undercity of Zon, and they're the initial action that sets off the domino effect that gets the story on the roll. And what I loved about this story is every character's action, they all have like little explosions. They all run into each other and affect each other, whether that character knows the other character or not, or directly interacts with that character. Every action affects the entire story, and it's wonderful to see such a well-constructed, well-thought-out storyline that just no one's unaffected by each decision. All the decisions seem very in character. The characters are built up very strongly, and they just do a wonderful job of creating relationships between all the characters and giving you a great emotional peek into each one, just enough to get to know them. The main characters Vi, Powder, Jace, Victor, you get really deep into their psyche. You really get to know these characters, and then the side characters, the supporting cast, the Vanders, Silco, Clagger, uh, all of these characters uh, carry weight. They carry emotional connections. Um, they give you just enough peek into their history, their attitude towards where they're living, their interactions with the main cast, to really give you a feel for how deep they've created uh, this world. And it's just very rare that within such a short period of time, so this is 9 episodes total, but within the first 3 episodes, you have completely entered the world. You're completely engrossed in the story, engrossed in the characters. You feel for them and their all the things, the trials and tribulations they have to go through. And this story puts these characters through the ringer. This is not a story of joy and happiness and success, but it really is a story of connecting these characters, this world, and making you feel like you want to know more about it. One thing the animation does for the story has to do with the acting, and that's the facial expressions, and it nails every single time a character wants to be sad or thoughtful, introspective, angry, annoyed. Just every emotion under the sun is hit perfectly in the facial features, which is not just rare in animation. It's that the minor changes throughout the characters in each scene within their facial acting allows you to see a character go from excited to worried to angry, like all within a time frame without having to listen to the character speak. You can see it all in their face. Before the opening credits, you get a 2-minute backstory. It just shows where Vander, Vi, and Powder, just kind of where they come from, giving you a little taste of what this world is and the kind of place that they start out in. And that is almost entirely without voice acting. There's a little bit of singing in there, but it's as emotional as Up. If you guys were, obviously anybody watching this probably remembers Up and that opening sequence and how you just fell in love and heartbreak for those characters. It's the same thing here. Works really well, and you can see it, everything within the facial acting. They did a wonderful job to pull you in as a viewer. So the fights in this are super well choreographed. They're very personal. They all relate to the characters in them, their emotional state, their fighting styles, their capabilities at the time, because their capabilities change over time in the series. It all works within the story level. The action tells part of the story. It's not okay, we had a cool story scene, now we have like a cut scene, fight scene. No, that's not how this works. This is very integral. The fights are as integral as the quiet story moments. They all work together. They managed to use the camera to like a well-made action movie in the sense that it created weight and movement, and so when something rammed into a wall, you felt it through the camera. So it's everything top to bottom. The story is amazing. There is quite a few flashbacks, but they're not overly long. They don't overtake the plot. They really keep you going and kind of fill in where they want you to, what you want to know, and what you want to know about the character who's talking about the flashback or who's participating in the flashback. It's very important to the story overall. So I'm just going to say, great job. It really is masterfully written, directed, animated, voice acting. Great job across the board. Specific shout out to the Powder voice actress, Mia Sinclair Janess, and the Silco voice actor Jason Spisak. They just everything they said, everything they did, all the emotional scenes carried all the weight. Wonderful job, wonderful job. And of course, you know I'm a sucker for strong relationships, and they just pulled it all in. Whether they're romantic relationships, brother, sisters, parental, friends, enemies, you know, forced to work together. They all work, they all land, and it's just wonderful top to bottom. I'm just gonna praise them for hours. I'm just gonna go ahead and give you an A plus, A plus for the whole series. Everything worked for me. I've heard very little response on negatives. There are a few we could talk about. I'd rather save those for more extensive discussion because some of them involve a little bit of spoilers. But I don't think they're enough to break my A plus rating. And can't wait for season 2. I'm super excited. So that's my initial review of the story of Arcane. Great job by Riot Games on just producing a monumental piece of entertainment. Thank you. Thank you for giving to me. All right, quick thing about the animation. So the animation is CG animated, which I have talked a little bit on the podcast about it, and I'm not a huge fan of CG and where it's gone, or where it's been. CG animation, you know, started as a additional tool. Like if you go back to an Aladdin back in the 90s, you'll see hand-drawn animation, and then for the lava they used the CG because it was easier to produce these certain types of animations, repetitive animations. So shiny things, inanimate objects. But as animation has improved, they've done cool things like hair and water and whatnot, and they've tried to do skin and humans and stuff like that. But what this did with animation specifically, I think did so well. Number one, it chose a specific art style, which is very like almost oil painting come to life. And they didn't break anything they animated out of that art style. So all of the hair, they didn't go and get a realistic hair animator, or same with the water, smoke, any effects. They didn't break the world by choosing a different animation style within those effects. Everything is within still the painterly style. So some hair might animate more in chunks. One character, Jinx, has these long braids that animate quite wildly with her personality, but she also has a little thing in her front of her hair that, you know, just basically moves as a whole chunk, but that it works within the style as opposed to trying to do furry and fluffy. Again, another character, Heimerdinger, very fluffy dog-looking character. You'll see that his mustache moves as basically one separate piece from the rest of them, and you get a little bit of flow and whatnot here and there, but everything else is very static. They don't try to animate cloth very much, which I think still, again, works within the art style chosen. And yeah, it worked because they were consistent and they went with it. The most masterful thing for me is the micro movements. So a micro movement, if you were to take a slowdown of the animation here, and you watch, the characters will not only just blink, which is a full eyelid movement. Their eyelids will move and flutter slightly. Their lips will open and close slightly. Their heads will move around when they're talking. Their heads will move around when they're not talking. Their bodies, their shoulders, everything interacts and feels connected to the character. So you get a lot of life. Even though it's a painterly style, it still feels like that character has so much life. And it helps, as I said earlier in the story portion of the review, it really helps with connecting with the emotional moments, which there are plenty in this. So when a character is crying, you can see their eyes, the tears flow, but also their eyes flutter, their chin quivers, their voice changes. So all of it, the voice acting, the animation, and the story beats come together in those moments that make you actually feel what's going on, and it's what makes it great. Character designs are really cool. They are all based on the original video game, but there are obviously some new characters. But also, they didn't stick with all the same, like a stock generic human. They didn't go with we'll call it the Disney Chipmunk style, where all the princesses look identical, or an anime where half the characters look the same except for the hair color. That's not it. They did full, complete faces for each character, both young and old for many of the characters, and so they all are very individualistic, and it helps you also that as personally it helps me connect more when I'm not looking at the same as 20 other people. It's actually a very specific individual and their reactions and everything. Great job in creating the characters, which includes also like runs that are different for each character, fighting styles that are different for each character, reactions for each character. It's just great top to bottom. Constant movement, as I said before, like just background characters who are sitting and talking and part of a conversation, but not necessarily the one speaking, and they're constantly just like a normal human, like I'm doing here, can't sit still, and they just definitely feel like they're alive within the scene. Background of just having beautiful scenery, not only beautiful scenery, but alive scenery, background movement, background lighting effects. Skip the lighting effects. Background movement. I love a wide city shot that gives you sense of scale and gives you sense of life within the city. There's a beautiful scene at a fair type event, and just so much going on, stuff in the foreground, stuff in the background, and it really does feel alive. And it's one of my favorite things about certain movies, and certain animated movies that really draw me in. Those are just a couple of my thoughts about what I liked about the animation within Arcane. I suggest everybody go watch it. Everybody, goes and watches. Each episode's about 40 minutes. All 9 of them are out now. The entire season is out. I can't wait for season 2. But there's my A+ non-spoiler review for Arcane. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully we'll get to talk about this more in a spoiler review with everybody else. Thanks, everybody.